Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton at Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more. The good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful April the 2nd, 2020. Ronald Deportes, Big C, is still out digging for gold. I know you must have found a lot of gold, Big C. The only problem, if you put too many gold blocks in the back of the Escalade, it may lower it down too much, Big C. I know you're all fair and love and war. Looking forward to getting you back on the saddle very soon. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac, this home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, Big C Sports, powered by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic from 3,000 miles away, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate the way things are going with that. Wow. Whew. The Big C pause. I know there's a lot going on in the world. Just over 1 million people have tested positive for the coronavirus. And there's always light at the end of the tunnel when we put our faith in God and trust in science and health. And I know that's all part of what we're all going to do. I want to make sure that we give out our crisis hotline, Veterans Crisis Hotline. My goodness, it could be for everybody now, but the Veterans Crisis Hotline is for people who need help, and they really have people who are experienced in helping veterans and their loved ones get help. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Or if you're online, go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can hopefully get some help. I know there's a lot of people who are just going in different directions trying to find a solution. I still say put your faith in God and stay informed about what's going on. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Also, launching a real estate listing channel spring of 2020. I know there's a lot of things going on with governors having people stay at home. I think 90% of the United States is being told to stay home right now. But people still have to find a way to prepare, to keep marketing, to keep putting your stones in the fire, your logs in the fire, whatever it is. Keep exercising, keep doing whatever it takes to make sure that when this thing is over, that you put yourself in a good position. Looking to recruit 100 real estate brokers to put their property listings on TV. And we can also do your loans. Great time to refinance. I know there's a lot of job uncertainty out there right now. It's not going to last forever. We've been through this before, and TV works. McDonald's is on TV. Even if we're having the pandemic, McDonald's is still on TV. Even though we're going through a pandemic, I still see car dealerships on television. Even though we're going through a pandemic, there are still sports teams that still have reports on TV, and sometimes playing replays or whatever it is. The business still goes on, and we want to make sure that people are aware of that too. Also considering doing a real estate podcast show, and that's coming up also in the spring of 2020. You know, everybody has their own thoughts about what keeps them happy in the world of sports. There's a lot of things going on in sports, and you know, I can cover things that I think are relevant. Everybody has their own thoughts on what that may be, but I know we're always still looking at what we can do as a society to make sure that we're all still being abreast of what's going on in the world of sports. There's a couple of sad announcements. Ed Farmer, the former White Sox broadcaster, passed away. He's 70 years old, lived a long, good life, former baseball player. There's always, we often give our thoughts and prayers to people But life is the circle of life. I think I saw that in the movie Lion King. There's a circle of life. We all want to be able to enjoy whatever we're doing, but he had a great experience, great time living, especially being a former Major League Baseball player. Some NFL news also: the Tennessee Titans running back Derrick Henry signed a franchise tender. We'll see how that all pans out. And it's just a matter of time before we get back into, hopefully, some NFL football. I know everybody has their own thoughts about if we're going to start it or not, if we're going to do the NFL draft coming up. I know a lot of people are still wondering, will the Raiders Stadium get finished by the time preseason starts down in Las Vegas, Allegiant Stadium? We don't know. How about SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, in Inglewood? Would that be ready to play? Would that be ready to even kick off by the time the preseason rolls around? So there's a lot of things going on for that. And I know people are still, it kind of drives you crazy at times because you're not really sure what to do. But even though we have somewhat of a shutdown with the governor telling people stay home, stay inside, I know people have to do their part. And I hope that we can. Even though there's some news that J-Lo and A-Rod were sneaking into a gym that said closed because of the coronavirus pandemic. Sometimes when you have money and influence, you can also think that you can trump science. But if science says stay away from certain things, and that's why the governors have reacted to the scientists, saying that you may have some unsafe places, hopefully they're not sneaking onto a cruise ship to see if they can get a workout going too. But that's their choice. Everybody knows what's going on in this great country. I just want to make sure I do my part to keep people abreast of what I think is important. So I want to just touch on a few things. I know in the world of college football, everybody's looking at how the athletic departments are affected by what's going on in the world of college football. And many athletic conferences right now, wow, they're bracing for the pause. They're also doing the Big C pause because a lot of that money is not coming in right now. They want to make sure they do that. And then there's some major college programs, they're saying, if you can believe this or not, they're saying that they actually spend more money than what comes in. I don't believe that at all. It's hard for me to believe that major programs are losing money because they have a big stockpile. I think, I may be wrong about this, but I believe Harvard has about a $40 billion endowment. So they're not worried about if they miss sports for this year. It's all fair in love and war. But when you think about sports and some of the moments in time that make us happy, some of Big C's thoughts on best college football games played in our era, I think when I look back to college football, one of the first college football games that I ever saw in person, it was Arizona State University. They were playing San Jose State. This was way back in the early 70s, I believe. And I remember seeing that game, and I believe Arizona State won 40-0 or 40-7. Those Sun Devils were they were being some rascals at the time. They came up to San Jose and put a beat down on the Spartans. But again, that was back in, I want to say, the early 70s, and Arizona State at that time was part of the WAC conference, and then San Jose State, I believe they were part of what was called the PCAA. But when you think about college football and some of the moments that we can hear the bands playing, we hear the crowds cheering after someone scores a touchdown. We know how touchdown, and we hear the crowds go crazy. Those moments are something that I'll never forget. But again, it started when I was a little boy. So as a reminder, sometimes you think about what are some of the games that made you like the sport that you like. What are some of the things that you did back in the day that made you get ready for a tailgate? And just our opinion, Big C's thoughts on some of the top games in college football. Just like me, when I first saw a college football game live, it was Arizona State at San Jose State back in the early 70s over in San Jose, and I got hooked ever since then. But a lot of people in the Midwest, they may think about Ohio State 42, Michigan 39. It was November 18th, 2006. It may seem like a long time ago, but it's not that long ago when you think about it. 2006, not a long, 14 years ago. But Ohio State and Michigan, they were actually competing for the top spot in the national championship. In fact, there was a case being made that even with Ohio State's win, that a rematch for a national championship game would pit the two best teams in the country against each other. And this, of course, was not true. Ohio State would get blown out by Florida in the national championship game, and Michigan would lose to USC in the Rose Bowl that same year. So it's amazing how when they make you play the games on the field, sometimes the outcome is different than what the pundits will have in mind. The game had high stakes too. It was the first time in the rivals' history that the two teams were ranked number 1 and number 2. The Buckeyes jumped out to an early lead, and they held off Michigan in the second half, but they, again, were beaten up by Florida in the national championship game. Also, another game for the good old boys down in the state of Texas. And again, my thoughts and prayers are still with people in Texas, those college kids that chartered a plane down to spring break, and I think 28 tested positive for coronavirus. Man, easier times back in 2014, October 11th. It was Baylor 61, TCU 58, and no, that's not a basketball score, but it could have been. Baylor TCU had an underrated and rich history as far as a rivalry game goes down in that part of the country. You normally think of Texas, Oklahoma, or Texas A&M, but the series taken a more dramatic and nationally relevant turn in recent years. Baylor just winning the conference in the past year in 2019 before they lost to Georgia down in the Sugar Bowl. But there was a 50-48 shootout in Waco in 2011 that introduced the Baylor Bears quarterback RG3, Robert Griffith III, and as a legitimate Heisman candidate. He would go on to win that award that year. But even that game could not top what happened 3 years later. Down 58-37, just less than 12 minutes to play. Baylor fired off 21 unanswered points in the span of about 7 minutes to tie the game with time expiring. And the Bears kicker Chris Callahan hit a 28-yard field goal to complete the come-from-behind victory. And the crowd went nuts as we love our college football, and everybody can't wait for it to get back into the saddle again. Really appreciate just going back to those times for the young kids down in Texas. Another game, especially for you Midwesterners, things have changed. Colorado 33, Missouri 31. At that time, they were both in the same conference, the Big 8 conference. Now, Colorado's in the Pac-12 and Missouri's in the SEC. So, if I can always brag to Big C, sometimes the Pac-12 got it better of the SEC back in 1990 before those teams made the jump. It was October 6, 1990. Many of the games in this countdown, they get recognition for what was at stake, usually national championships or major bowl victories on the line, or sometimes just bragging rights, as I'm saying, it's the Pac-12 versus the SEC because they moved on to Colorado and Missouri. But thinking about this, the ending between Colorado and Missouri in 1990, it still gets on the list of everybody as one of the greatest games, but one of the most bizarre games because of the officiating blunder. And you heard about the fifth down. That's when it was born. They were down 31-27 to Missouri. Colorado faced their first and goal in the final minute of the game after spiking the ball and a failed rushing attempt, if you recall. The Buffaloes called their final timeout, if you believe in timeouts. However, the chain crew, I don't know if they were into prop betting or not, but they didn't see it. So they blew the call. They didn't notice it after another failed run and a second spike in which it should have resulted in a turnover on downs. Colorado completed the quarterback sneak for the touchdown, and then also in a matter of whether or not they crossed the goal line, we don't know, but the crowd still, there was some crowds that were happy and some crowds that were upset. No matter what you think about what happened back in that game, it was still a great game. Buffalo's got a win because they got the extra down, and they came away with a 33-31 win. If you good old boys can think it back to the days when college football, it ran through Nebraska. It ran through Florida State. Florida State 18, Nebraska 16, January 1, 1994. What a game it was. Amazingly, think about it. Neither Tom Osborne nor the great Bobby Bowden had a national championship ring when Nebraska and Florida State met for the national championship in the Orange Bowl in 1994. Remember, Nebraska used to always win the Big 8 title, and they would end up in the Orange Bowl, oftentimes playing someone like a Miami, which was an independent back in the day. But they met in the Orange Bowl, Nebraska and Florida State, for their national championship, and it was in 1994. Bowden came away with a victory, and it was a nail-biter really down to the end. The Huskers kicker, Byron Bennett, hit a field goal to give his team a 16-15 lead with just over a minute to play in the game. However, the ensuing kickoff went out of bounds, giving the Seminoles good field position it was FSU's Scott Bentley who then hit a field goal with 21 seconds left to give his team an 18-16 lead. And of course, the crowd loved that part. Nebraska actually had a chance to kick another game-winning field goal, but Bennett's 45-yard attempt is sailed wide left as time expired, and that made a lot of the good old boys down in Florida happy. It was always the Seminoles losing out on wide rights or wide lefts, but that was normally when they were playing against the great Miami Hurricanes, their in-state rival. And so another team, when you think about championships, how far we've come. Auburn 43, Georgia 38. Those programs are still on top of the world. But November 16, 2013, you think about some of the great games that have been played down in the SEC, in the world of college football. And sometimes, as we need now for this pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, sometimes you just need a miracle. And Auburn got a couple of those during this run to the BCS championship game in 2013. One of them came against Georgia in mid-November. One game, think about this, one game before the miraculous kick six. More than that, it's just amazing how college football that we're missing right now because we miss spring football, it drew so many people together, especially down in the South, as a lot of programs are saying, believe it or not, that they may be hurting a little bit because of the lack of revenue coming in. Well, down to 1 point with less than a minute to go, facing a 4th down and 18, Auburn quarterback, former Georgia defensive back Nick Marshall, threw a Hail Mary pass to Ricardo Lewis. The ball was actually overthrown, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The ball was actually tipped, fell right into the hands of Lewis, who sprinted the rest of the way for a 73-yard touchdown, and the crowd went nuts. I'll still never forget the thought of that game. Auburn had a comfortable lead early in the 4th quarter, but gave up 21 straight points to the Bulldogs, and the rest was history. It was just a matter of time before you see some of those great epic games that are played down in the South be considered some of the greatest games in the history of sports. Auburn 43, Georgia 38. I love watching college football. I really miss college football, especially as a panacea for a lot of things that are going on. Another great game down in Texas. If you recall the old Southwest Conference, it was actually 1969. That was before I saw the Arizona State and San Jose State game in California. Texas 15, Arkansas 14. It's like the old Southwest Conference days. The days of old were great days for those two teams. And think about it now, Texas is in the Big 12 and Arkansas is in the SEC. They're just like Colorado and Missouri. Things change in times. But some people called it in 1969 the game of the century. I doubt that, especially when you look at the Rose Bowl games that happened between Ohio State and also USC over the years. And then, actually, if you also want to throw in Michigan and Texas, and then USC and Texas, just some great games have been played in the Rose Bowl. But the Razorbacks, they had a 14-0 lead. They were heading into the 4th quarter. However, the Longhorns scored on a 2-point conversion, and head coach Darrell Royal didn't want to go for the tie, making it a 14-8 game, facing 4th down with less than 5 minutes to go. Texas, they opted to go for it, throwing a pass that would set up the game-winning score. And afterwards, it was the late President Richard Nixon declared Texas to be the national champions back when national champions were declared before bowl season. And many people say that was not right because Penn State was actually the undefeated team. But you know, as the great Nixon said, this commercial that was named after him, "We'll leave the light on for you." So if you can understand that, back in the day in the Watergate era, everybody can have their own fun with the "We'll leave the light on for you" story. It's another great game down in the state of Florida, where football is king. It's really only second to California. That's just my opinion. I'm a California boy. Florida State 24, Florida 21. That was in 1996. With all the floods and all the hurricanes that come to the state of Florida, still called the Sunshine State, football has made it amazing. In addition to Miami, Florida and Florida State, they played some high-stakes games throughout the history. In the 1990s, with Steve Spurrier and the great Bobby Bowden on the sidelines, few games were more intriguing than that 1996 game. The undefeated with the Gators ranked number 1 in the country. The Seminoles ranked number 2 in the country. Though Florida State jumped out to an early lead, Florida crawled back and came back with the eventual help of Heisman Trophy winner Danny Wuerffel. So Florida State hung on for a 24-21 win. The two teams would face each other again in a rematch in the Sugar Bowl. And sometime it wasn't so sweet of a treatment. The score was actually 52-20. It was an easy win by the Gators, and the crowd went nuts for that one. So everybody loves football. And at this time, we want to do our job, Big C Sports style, just going back over some of the thoughts of what made football great. There was still a game that I saw at Notre Dame Stadium. I don't think it made the list, but it was Todd Marinovich, and he led USC into Notre Dame, and Notre Dame came back and won that game in the final moments of it. But that's just been a lot of games played back at Notre Dame, and touchdown Jesus, of course. I always love the rivalry between USC and Notre Dame. But I'm going to take you back to the most memorable game in 2005, affectionately known, and some people in South Bend hated this year. It's called the Bush Push. Notre Dame and USC, they staged the classic during the Trojans' 2005 BCS championship run. They had a 27-game win streak on the line. The mighty USC Trojans, they found themselves down. The grass was a little bit high back there, Big C. They didn't want to cut the grass too low at Notre Dame for that game, but it was a 31-28 lead at that time for the Irish. A back-and-forth game. In fact, 3 touchdowns were scored in the final 5 minutes and 4 seconds. With only seconds remaining, the Trojans quarterback Matt Leinart out of Mater Dei High School in Santa Ana, he attempted to run the football himself in for a game-winning touchdown, but it came up just a little bit short. Head coach Pete Carroll managed to get 7 seconds put back on the clock. The very next play, in the spiking of the ball, Matt Leinart, he squirmed his way into the end zone with a little bit of help from Heisman Trophy winning running back Reggie Bush, who came out of Helix High School of San Diego, and the crowd went nuts, at least the USC side. It's amazing how that game, it just kept USC's win streak alive as they were trying to get to a three-peat to win the national championship game. I remember, I believe Notre Dame went into the locker room. They came out wearing blue jerseys, and then at halftime they switched to green. I believe that's what I saw, but sometimes people say that I can be colorblind too, so I don't know if that's the case at all. But I still believe they had blue jerseys, and then they had green jerseys for that game. At the end, it was the Trojans, the mighty Trojans of Southern California, winning that game. From some people in the Midwest, you think about football and how great it used to be with these two great teams. We talked about conference changes. These teams were actually in the Big 8 at the time. And also, they were part of a Southwest Conference team at the time, conference. Nebraska 35, Oklahoma 31, November 25th, it was 1971. Now, Nebraska's actually playing in the Big 10. Oklahoma's playing in the Big 12. A handful of games claim to be the game of the century, but one stands out above the rest. Nebraska versus Oklahoma, 1971. The old Big 8 days, that was a classic number 1 versus number 2 battle. It couldn't be missed, especially by all the fans in the Midwest that bleed football, and I know they're really missing it right now. The ending was not as dramatic as it could have been. The contest lived up to the billing. It was a close game between the two storied programs. Easily a defining moment was Johnny Rogers' punt return for a 72-yard touchdown, and that broke the back in that game. And it's just one of the games that I saw on TV, but Nebraska 35, Oklahoma 31. Not many people can say that there was a better game than that. Everybody has their own opinion. And then I think about other games that have been great throughout the years that people might say, oh, maybe it was or maybe it wasn't the greatest game. But if you go to the LSU and Kentucky game in 2002, them good old boys down south, Big C, I know they have the great tailgate, but it was down 30-27, Kentucky on the road. LSU needed a miracle. The Tigers got one in the form of a Hail Mary pass, Doug Flutie style, when Boston College beat Miami. A deflected pass from quarterback Marcus Random that was caught by Davey Henderson for a 74-yard score. The thing was, Kentucky had already celebrated by dousing head coach Guy Morris with Gatorade. At the same time, you can't celebrate the game before it's over. It's still called the Bluegrass Miracle was official. LSU went on to beat Kentucky by the score of 33-30. You know, that same LSU went on later in 2020 to win the college football national championship game by beating Clemson and knocking Clemson off the unbeaten ranks. One of the more exciting games, if you like points, It was BYU 46, SMU 45. BYU as an independent, and then SMU out of I believe they were out of the Southwest Conference. It was back in December 19th, 1980. There was a time when the Holiday Bowl was a huge game, and then when BYU and SMU were national powers, all of those elements came together in a perfect storm. Sometimes the storms come and the thunder comes. It was a perfect storm. When you think about how many points were put up on the scoreboard. In the 1980 edition of the Holiday Bowl, considered by some to be the best comeback ever in college football, the Mustangs had that great backfield duel of Eric Dickerson and Craig James, the Pony Express. The Cougars had quarterback Jim McMahon that went on with the Bears and helped them win the Super Bowl later. The SMU was up 45-25, 4 minutes remaining, and McMahon led the Cougars to 21 straight points thanks to 3 touchdown passes and 1 onside kick and a block punt. And to this day, still one of the most improbable comebacks in college football, and the crowd actually loved that from way back in the day. That's when the Holiday Bowl was really packed with men, and people loved showing up to watch college football. And I think it was still one of the greatest games that I've seen in my time of watching college football. Also, when you think about football and how important it is, especially for the good old boys down south, Florida, Florida State, those programs are played in so many great games over the years. November 26, 1994, we have some more Sunshine State rivalry. When they're not having hurricanes down south, these two programs are really picking it up and laying it down. When Florida and Florida State got together, the only team better oftentimes would be Miami. And there are times when they all wouldn't play each other throughout the season. But think about it. The Sunshine State rivalry, if you think about the 1994 edition between Florida and Florida State, known as the Choke at Doak, FSU overcame a 31-3 deficit with a 28-point fourth quarter rally to tie Florida, at which time the game, think about it, it was the NCAA's record for biggest comebacks. Like the 1996 meeting, the two sides would meet in a rematch in the Sugar Bowl, though FSU could not complete the comeback win in the regular season. It packed up, it actually picked up where it left off in the bowl game, and the Seminoles went on to beat the Gators by the score of 23-17, and a lot of the good old boy fans, they really loved it. Florida football has always been considered some of the best football, no matter what state you're from or who you love. Another great football game. Tradition is amazing. We had Colorado 27, Michigan 26, September 24th, 1994. You can't ask for much more than 2 Associated Press top 10 teams. They squared off in an early season game, especially when the game came down to the final play. One of the more memorable endings in the past 30 years of college football came in Ann Arbor between Michigan and Colorado, back when both programs were near the top of the college football universe. And Michigan's still hanging out around the college football universe. Colorado's trying to get back. They just have to shore up some things in recruiting and with their coaching. But when you think about it, one of these great endings that we'll always talk about no matter where you are and no matter what you're doing. Down 26-21 in the final seconds, it was Colorado quarterback Cordell Stewart, known as Slash. He launched a 64-yard Hail Mary pass that landed into the hands of Michael Westbrook after being tipped, and the play would later be known as the Miracle at Michigan. Yeah, the crowd went nuts, at least the Colorado side, but I'll still remember that as one of the greatest games that I've ever seen in the world of college football. And I just appreciate the fact that I'm such a sports nut that it always sticks in my mind. One more game I'll get into before the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout, down in the state of Florida, the Sunshine State where the Hurricanes live. It was Miami, Florida, 17. Florida State, 16. Wide right, right left, whatever it was always wide of the goalpost. 1990 perhaps. No rivalry had more fuel than Miami's battles with Florida State. Though they were not ACC foes yet, the Florida schools were at the top of the college football world. One of the most memorable games in this series was the initial wide right. Remember, wide right? It is wide right! And we love those games that they would play, but it oftentimes came down to a field goal. Seminoles kicker Gary Thomas missed a would-be game-winning field goal. Little did fans know that wide right would actually be wide right 1, with other additions coming later. I'm sure that's not very pleasing to some of the fans down in Florida that got some heartburn by the wide rights. The great Bobby Bowden, one of them. The other would be wide right left, or wide left. Is it right or left? It's either wide or straight, but it was oftentimes right or left when the good old boys got together. The Hurricanes and the Seminoles really loved watching how much passion those kids would play with. Many of them played against each other in high school, and they would later come on and play against each other in college too. We're going to take what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause in the world of college football. What made you happy? We'll be right back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on an app that I love called Google. Or Alexa, just say Google. Or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear Welcome to the Show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. Also, just thinking about all the things going on in California. Still looking forward to launching the real estate listing channel in the spring of 2020. Waiting for the governor to let people do open houses. There's just a lot going on right now that's bigger than some of the goals that we have, but we're still going forward, looking forward to that. Also, maybe adding a podcast channel for real estate as well. Just waiting for some more leadership from the Governor Newsom in California. The goal is to recruit 100 real estate brokers, list your properties on TV. McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, and sports teams do it, and they will do it again once we can all resume. So really looking forward to that. Also want to get back into the world of college football, some of the top games before I get into a few other things that made me think about why I love this game so much. I go back to 1979. It was Alabama 14, Penn State 7. You had the SEC, and Penn State was actually independent at that time before they joined into the Big 12, before they joined into the Big 10. But it was 1979, January 1. One of the best goal line stands in the history of college football came on one of the biggest stages, the 1979 Sugar Bowl between Alabama and Penn State. Top two teams in the country. It was a defensive struggle. No one likes a 14-7 game. One of my brothers does. We call him. I say, Charles, why you want to see a 14-7 game? He likes defense. I'm sure he loved this game. But the Tide won in a heroic goal line stand against the Nittany Lions. Rushing attack, legendary play-by-play announcer Keith Jackson. Whoa, Nelly. He had the famous call on television. It was a fourth down and a foot separating top-ranked Penn State and Alabama from a possible national championship. And it was amazing. Fusina hands off to Gooman, and he didn't make it. Indeed, he did make it. What an unbelievable goal line stand by Alabama. The top two storied programs as the crowd went a little bit nuts. Not sure if he got it or not. The 1979 Sugar Bowl, considered by many one of the best games of all time. I'm just not buying it. It was 14-7. That can't be one of the best games in the universe. That's just my opinion. None other than Notre Dame in Houston. It was a 35-34 game. It was very cold. It was cold and sleet and snow on the ground. January 2nd, 1979. A little bit behind the news-wise, but you think about this guy named Joe Montana from Notre Dame. He could be a pretty good NFL player, many people thought. The comeback in the 1979 Cotton Bowl game between Notre Dame and Houston, the Cougars led it 34-12 during an icy day in Dallas in early January. The comeback was even more impressive, given that Montana, he was suffering from flu-like symptoms. We've all heard about that. No, it was not coronavirus, but he was suffering from the flu, and he came back from it just like this great country. Going to come back from this coronavirus pandemic. However, with a little chicken soup at times and some prayers from Touchdown Jesus, the game was dubbed the Chicken Soup Game. Montana helped lead Notre Dame to 23 fourth-quarter points, and they came away with an improbable 35-34 win over the boys from Texas. That was just a miraculous game, and really one of the games that launched Joe Montana into the bright lights of college football. Until they were upstaged by Cal and Stanford, The big game out in Berkeley, California. It was in 1982, November the 20th. Cal 25, Stanford 20. I've done many games from Cal Berkeley Memorial Stadium and also from Stanford down on the farms. That's where I got my feet wet in the world of college football back in 1996. As far as improbable finishes go, the old 5 lateral plays is up there among the best. The great Joe Starkey. That's why the big game in Cal and Stanford in 1982 is one of the greatest games in college football history. And no matter who you are and where you were, everybody knows about that game. Where it was like 15, it looks like 15 pitch handoffs. I'm sure if they would have looked at it a second time, there's a couple of knees that may have been on the ground. But at very least, one of the most iconic finishes, down to a point with only seconds remaining. Cal returned a squib kick for a touchdown, evading tacklers and Stanford band members. And you also never going to hear a call like the one that came up with the great Joe Starkey. I remember Joe Starkey yelling, "The band is out of the field! The band is out of the field!" And then, Cal went on to win that game at Strawberry Canyon. That has to be one of the best finishes to a college football game. 2 Bay Area rivals, 2 Pac-10 rivals at the time. That's a game that will always go down as maybe the best finish in the history of college football, no matter what part of the country you're from. How many people have won a game when you knock the band over at the end of the game in the end zone to win the game? I just think that was very amazing. And the band is out of the field! The great Joe Starkey, I'll never forget that call. It was absolutely amazing. You good old boys on the East Coast. Boston College, 47. Miami Hurricanes, 45. That was November 23, 1984. The term Heisman moment, it may have been born on this date, late November night in the Orange Bowl. Boston College quarterback, the great Doug Flutie, the 1984 recipient of the award, cemented his place in college football history with his Hail Mary pass against Miami, Florida in an all-time classic. It had 6 seconds remaining in the game. The great Doug Flutie took a snap. He scrambled backward, and he launched the ball about 65 yards into the hands of Gerard Phelan. And just like that, the band wasn't out of the field, but they did win the game. The crowd went nuts. It's amazing how they went down to Florida and pulled off a big upset. That really put Doug Flutie on the map, as well as made Boston College a little bit more favored to watch as some of the greatest games in college football. Just a couple of more games, and I want to touch on some things that happened in the world of college football. Not many people can forget that it felt like somebody got robbed. And it felt like Miami got robbed. It was Ohio State 31 and Miami 24. January 3rd, 2003. No pass interference call in recent memory was more controversial than the one in the 2003 BCS National Championship game between the Miami Hurricanes and the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Hurricanes led 24-17 in overtime, and the Buckeyes faced a game-defining 4th down and 3. Ohio State's pass was broken up by the Hurricanes defensive back, Glenn Sharp. Game over, right? So the crowd went nuts thinking that Miami had won a national championship. And about 3 days later, it seemed like it was 3 days later because that's how long it took for that flag to land on the field. It wasn't over. A late flag fell on the field while Miami Hurricane players were celebrating. Pass interference on Sharp, and 2 plays later, running back Maurice Clarett ran in for a touchdown, and Ohio State would win the national championship over the star-studded Miami Hurricanes. And it was an overtime game, and it's still a game that many people call egregious because they felt there was no way that pass interference should have been called in that moment in time. Another great game had also to do with the Miami Hurricanes. That was a team of the decade back in the 80s. Miami 31, Nebraska 30. Down in the Orange Bowl, January 1, 1984. The Orange Bowl between Miami, Florida, and Nebraska, it will forever be known as the game where Cornhuskers coach Tom Osborne, he decided to go for it for the 2-point conversion instead of a tie, and it failed. But I love the moxie that he showed, and there was a reason that Nebraska was always a dominant team. They had no fear. The Huskers had many great teams during the Osborne's tenure, but the 1983-1984 team was one of the best in the history of the Nebraska program. Among the players on the roster were Turner Gill, Irvin Fryer, Mike Rozier. Miami was just starting its great football dynasty under the great Howard Schnellenberger. Nebraska fell behind early but kept battling back through the game. a touchdown in the final minute of the game. It pulled the Huskers to within 1 point. Instead of going for the tie, the great Tom Osborne, Gambling Tom, he opted to go for 2. He wanted to win the game outright. However, Turnagill's pass was batted down in the end zone, and the Miami Hurricanes dynasty was actually born, and the crowd went nuts down in the once beautiful Orange Bowl in Miami. I thought that was a great place for college football. Just 2 more games. Everybody has their thoughts of what is a great game and what is a great comeback. I'm going to go to Auburn 34, Alabama 28, November 30, 2013. Auburn's luck almost, think about this, the luck almost ran out in 2013. But think about it. A team can be both good and bad and have things fall into place. It happened in the Georgia game, and also it happened when the Tigers were just about as dramatic. No moment was more dramatic for Auburn than its 2013 National Championship game run. It's a game that was so exciting that many people say it might be the best game in the history of SEC football. Against Alabama in the Iron Bowl, and what is now known as the Kick 6 game, down 21-7 at 1 point in the second quarter. Auburn made a thrilling comeback. Eventually, they traded touchdowns with the Crimson Tide to lock things at 28 with less than 1 minute remaining. Alabama running back T.J. Yeldon took what looked like to be the final play of regulation out of bounds, but head coach Nick Saban, think about how great Nick's been. He pushed and he argued, just like LSU did against them this year. He argued to get 1 second put back on the clock so they could attempt the game-winning field goal. He got his wish, but the result was not one that he wanted. Same thing happened with the game against LSU this year. He got his wish. Things didn't go his way. Adam Griffin's 57-yard field goal fell short into the arms of Auburn's Chris Davis, who was waiting in the end zone. Davis returned the kick 100-plus yards the other way to give Auburn an amazing and improbable 34-28 win, and the crowd went nuts down at Jordan-Hare. I'll never forget the sight of the sidelines where some of the players were just in tears for Alabama, and they were also in tears for Auburn, but they were in tears for a much happier reason. I would say the game that still burns in my craw, because I love the USC football program. And I remember got my start in doing football as a spotter with the late Tom Kelly, who was a broadcaster for the USC Trojans. Again, my first game for college football, it was Arizona State at San Jose State back in the early part of the 70s. But one of the best games I've ever seen, even though the outcome gave me heartburn, it was at the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, to see USC with their winning streak, 34-game win streak, on the line, and they were looking to be the only team in college football to win 3 in a row to three-peat. January 4th, 2006. Not all national championship games in the BCS era were created equal. In terms of star power on the field and finish of a game, the 2005-2006 national championship game between Texas and USC is one of the best games in the history of not only the BCS era, but college football, period. You have the traditional rivals, USC representing the West Coast, Texas representing the Southwest. California versus Texas is big on big. The history of these storied programs is amazing. USC had dominated the series leading up to this game, and they were actually the favorite in the game. It was one of Pete Carroll's coaching mistakes, in my opinion. You have the Heisman Trophy winner, Reggie Bush. He didn't touch the ball the last 2 carries for Southern Cal. They gave it to Lindell White. But it's all fair in love and war because Vince Young played one of the best college football games I've ever seen in my life as a college football quarterback. And I'll never forget how that game ended. The Trojans riding a 34-game winning streak and were led by Heisman winners Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart, 2 California All-Star players, Bush out of Helix in San Diego and Leinart out of the great modern day of Santa Ana, California. And that was the height of the USC dynasty. And maybe they'll get back on top. However, the Longhorns, they had been there the year before, and Vince Young put on a clinic against Michigan in the Rose Bowl, and they had won that game. So they went back-to-back to the Rose Bowl, just like USC. Now think about what happened. It was such an amazing game. Longhorns quarterback, Vince Young, he had other plans than coming and celebrating USC's win. 467 total yards of offense. He also scored the go-ahead touchdown on a 4th and 5 with 19 seconds remaining, just talk about the energy in that stadium from start to finish with the Rose Bowl. It was one of those most classic games that you'll ever see in college football history. I remember Reggie Bush had a long run in the first half of the game, about 40 yards, got down inside the red zone, and he pitched the ball out to someone on his team, and they fumbled it, and Texas recovered it. Also, Matt Leinart threw an interception in the end zone, so that took some points off the board. And then Texas, they scored before halftime, but the runner with his knee on the ground, and they never really challenged that. I guess you couldn't challenge at that time, but they had just challenged that, it would have not been a touchdown. So there's a lot of things that line up in the universe for the great Mack Brown to have Texas come into Southern California and get a win. But the thing that I remember most about that game, it was big on big. The atmosphere was incredible. The Rose Bowl was electric. It really is the granddaddy of them all. And I think it showed college football what college football should be. And at the final whistle, Texas that came to California and got a win over maybe college football's most dynastic program, at least during the 80s and the 2000s, because they were running Rose Bowls in Pac-10 and Pac-12 championships. It seemed like almost every year. So you got to just take it to heart. That's my thoughts, Big C style, on some of the top college football games in the universe. I love college football. I hope we get the games back. I know we need it back. There's so much going on in the world of college football. And right now, NCAA conferences, they're all bracing, on this athletic pause. And we know that we got to get through this. We got to trust our science. We got to trust our medical system. And we'll all get through this. But I think about those games that are just my opinion, Big C style, on some of the better games in the history of college football. Look at what's happening now. The highest paid college football coaches and their athletic programs, their biggest challenge is not can they win a game. The biggest challenge now is can science defeat this coronavirus pandemic. But just to look at some of the top coaches and what they're doing right now and how they're holding up with a lot of layoffs and people being furloughed from work and wondering if they're going to be able to put food on the table. Some of the greatest coaches in the game, if they get the money, of course they earn it. You think about the great Dabo Swinney. He makes, with Clemson, $9,315,000 a year. That's a lot of money, and I'm sure all the fans at Clemson, they cheered when they heard how much money the great Dabo Swinney was making. But he's built a great program at Clemson. They've been in 3 of the last 4 national championship games. Also, the great Nick Saban, University of Alabama. He makes $8,857,000 a season, and a lot of people say he's still the best coach in college football, even though they've lost the last 2 years and not winning the national championship game. They were in it 1 year and then didn't make the playoffs this final season. Jim Harbaugh, a lot of people said maybe he would be the savior, the next Bo Schembechler at Michigan, but it hasn't happened. He's still one of the highest paid coaches in college football, $7,504,000. I always thought that Jim Harbaugh would come back to the world of NFL, but you're making $7 million at Michigan. There's no need to leave that. Jimbo Fisher down at Texas A&M, a little bit under the fire at Texas A&M at $7,500,000. The Texas A&M program is loaded with athletes. They're loaded with players. Might even be more talented than Texas. But the problem for A&M, they're playing in the SEC. So the SEC officials, that's old friendships. They go back way, way long ago in a galaxy far, far away, and it's hard to break those friendships, and you may not get everything you need when it comes to getting the right call. That's just my opinion. Also, Kirby Smart, another SEC coach down at Georgia, he makes $6,787,000. As people are being furloughed and Georgia's on lockdown, no fault of their own. If you can get the money, by all means, get the money. Gus Malzahn, Auburn, out of the SEC, $6,827,000. And I'm sure it's another program down in Alabama where money seems to flow like moonshine, Big C. And these coaches are not gonna take a pay cut, even though a lot of the professional leagues, they're telling coaches to take a pay cut, a 10% pay cut, or even days in they're not gonna pay, for the broadcast rights as they're not having fights. So everybody's taking pay cuts. I want to see if college football will actually have that consciousness. Jeff Brom, Purdue, the Big Ten, $6,600,000 a year. That's a lot of money for a team that really is not a championship caliber team in the Big Ten. They're trying to rebuild, but you're not going to knock off Ohio State. You're not going to knock off Michigan and Penn State and Wisconsin, and then you have Iowa and even Minnesota's on the rebound. They're looking to have a good program this year too. Also, number 9, Lincoln Riley out of Oklahoma, part of that Big 12 dynasty. He makes $6,384,000 a year. It doesn't mean that he's going to win a national championship, but they're always competing for that Big 12 title. Really love the way Oklahoma has survived. It seems year after year they're always there. Number 10 on the list, Dan Mullen out of University of Florida at $6,070,000. There's a lot of money going to some coaches down in the SEC. And of course, are they going to take a pay break? Are they going to take a pay cut? Are they going to put some of their money on pause the way a lot of their athletic programs are hurting right now because they don't have football and they're not getting the spring football in, and they may even lose out on some of the revenue. We don't know if it's going to happen or not, but at the same time, you're asking a lot of these coaches and a lot of these, I guess, fraternities, facilities are going to be empty. They're telling so many people down south that you got to find a way to lower your outcome, the output of money. If it's not coming in, you got to find a way to keep from paying out so much. But will these coaches actually be a part of the solution when it comes to that? I doubt it. I doubt if any of them is going to go and say, I'll take less when we have to furlough our teachers. It's all fair and love and war. Also, just a couple of more. Mike Gundy. I'm 40. I'm a man. The great coach at Oklahoma State down in the Big 12 Conference makes $5,125,000 a year. And this is a lot of other coaches that are making a lot of money in the world of college football. Out on the West Coast, you have the highest salary goes to David Shaw at Stanford at $4,613,000, but that's like number on the 20 list in the country. I know we all have a lot going on in this country, but there's still a lot of good things happening too. I want to just jump real quick to the NFL. New England Patriots owner Bob Kraft, he allows his airplane, a 767 airplane, to bring N95 masks from China to America to help the hospitals and our first line of defense with the hospitals, the nurses, and the doctors. That's important. I'm really proud of that. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker, he found himself in need of an assist to help the state in fighting the coronavirus pandemic and the shortages. He called Bob Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots. It's amazing what he did. His team's private plane was unscheduled to return to Boston from China on Thursday evening, carrying more than 1 million masks that are critical to the healthcare providers fighting the coronavirus. I mean, that's so important. I know Bob Kraft has been through his issues. They let Tom Brady go from being a Patriot to a Pirate for the rest of his days. And that's okay. After you tell him you love him, you got to ship him off. But it's all fair, love, and war. But who could not like what he did? I know he had his issues down in Florida, but nobody's perfect. But allow them to bring back 1 million N95 masks. That's going to help a lot of people. You say sports and politics don't mix. It does mix. There's a lot of good things going on in the world of sports. So I'm really proud of Bob Kraft for doing that. Not everybody is going to do whatever it takes to help people, but he did that. And there's so much talk about, who's going to play where, and will coronavirus cancel all sports this year? I don't think it's going to, but I'm just appreciative when I see athletes and sports people do a lot of good because some people think it doesn't mix. Just an update on coronavirus. The USA tops 5,100 people who tested positive, not fatalities, but people who had a positive test on the deadliest day yet. Florida and 3 other states issue stay-at-home orders. The CDC considers having everybody wear a mask. That's important. The USA recorded its deadliest day, more than 1,000 fatalities since the coronavirus pandemic, the outbreak, more than 215,000 overall infections. I know a lot of people just want to know who won a game, but this to me, I just keep praying that we get 1,000, actually 1 million pastors all over the world to pray for a cure to this pandemic. I know science will solve it. I just hope that we can pray and use science. We got to do whatever we can and listen to our medical science experts about staying inside, keeping that distance. And I was just doing some banking today, and of course they make you stand 6 feet apart. I was like 15 in line, It took almost 40 minutes to get into the bank. But everybody's going to do their part. I just hope that we can all get on top of this thing and work together to solve it. I want to say you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on an app that I love called Google or Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports from 3,000 miles away. And you can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Really appreciate that. Launching a real estate listing show in the spring of 2020. I know we got to do what Governor Gavin Newsom says, and we just got to wait and do whatever we got to do until things get better. And I'm hoping that I can be a part of that solution by every day talking about the coronavirus pandemic, what we can do to keep our kids safe, to keep our families safe, to let people know what's going on in the world of sports, because I love this business. I love this country. More important, I love my family. Not assuming that everybody knows what to do, not assuming that everybody watches the news. They're just some tips on talking to children about the COVID-19 pandemic, and I just Googled some things that medical science is saying. When it comes to kids, you want to tell them the truth, but you don't want them to panic. You want to encourage them to ask questions, to talk about how they feel, how things are progressing with the information they're receiving. Remember, kids have phones, so they can go online and they can get freaked out if you're not really on top of it. So don't panic. You want to talk to them calmly. The children are going to mimic the parents' actions. So if we're panicked, then of course they may feel a little bit more stressed, even though they may not be able to express it the way we do. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they're a trusted source of factual, up-to-date information, and I encourage people to just go and do that too. Get updated information so we're not just flying with our heads in the sand. Know the boundaries. You got to limit screen time on TV and those tablets in their hands, because you don't want them to get too much information that can scare them. Make sure that we provide reassurance and a place of comfort. Tell the children they're going to be okay. They know they can't go back to school right now, that school's been canceled. Sometimes the family trips have been postponed because of these actions. We want to do what we can to help keep them safe and contain this COVID-19 outbreak. Empower kids to do more at home, playing games at home, whether it's kids playing in the backyard or exercising, just keeping your distance from other people. Hygiene is really important. Remind them the importance of continuous proper hygiene, washing their hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Front and back, they just got to get that 20-second time in there, making sure their face is being clean. And, tell them you love them every day. We all do that. I just want to make sure that I do my part. And for some people who may not have that home environment, I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, do whatever it takes to be happy. Play some video games if you got to. Read a book. You can text your friends if you can still do that. And we all got to find a way to just keep the sanity. So I know everybody's going to do their part. Pay attention to what's going on with TV. Sports all over the world is great. Even though a lot of people are on pause, I still know that we can use sports as a way to get people to engage each other and feel good about something again. And we got to always do that. And so the delays in sports is real. This was not a hoax. We got to forgive people. We got to all do our part to make sure the people that we love are taken care of and feel great. Pick up the phone and make the call. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe? I just want to say I hope that everybody can stay healthy, wealthy, and wise. Keep hope alive, like the great Jesse Jackson says. Tell your family that you love them. We all need that comfort, that peace of mind that we know with God's prayer, God's providence, and help of medical science that we will get through, and we'll all hopefully get through soon. Every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide, you can follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe As I always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports Show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.